So on the right, you see a bunch of comments. Salary calculator, to calculate salary. A constructor, which is not used. We have a calculate method, which takes salary and then multiplies it from a bunch of numbers before returning. What does it do? I wouldn't know. On the left, we have a clean version of the same method. You have salary calculator and a method calculate after taxes. So you get salary, which you get in cash directly. So some salary that you get on paper gets multiplied from first tax, from second tax, and then you got a bonus, and that's the actual amount of money you get. So this is how a salary is calculated, and it's clear just by reading um, this method. So what did we do? We renamed our method and we restructured it. And we also renamed magic numbers with named constants. Do you have any questions?
No, no.
I see Mark X said hum, and I wonder what for. Do you have any question?
No, it seems the Twitch stream was acting up for a bit
Oh,
earlier.
okay. Alright, so code structure. I always like saying that writing code is much like writing a book because you compose words, which are variables and keywords in your code, and then you turn them into sentences, which you could call functions, and then everything is put in a paragraph, which could be called a um, a class, and a paragraph makes up a chapter, which could be called either a namespace. Actually, yes, which is a namespace, and namespaces form a program, which is a book. So this is the code structure in comparison to book structure. So when you write code, you should declare variables close to their usage. Dependent functions should be close. Similar functions should be close. And I'll illustrate my point. I'll do a split screen now between the two. Okay, that was a bad idea. So my point was that we have properties, and this is all level related. So they're all close together. That's what I meant. And I have go to level function, and my go to level function is right next to go to next level function because it uses it right there. So there is no reason to put it somewhere down, but it makes sense to put it right next to where it was used. Some people like doing ridiculous things as example. Let's make a test. They do something like this. Um, let's say we want to create our game, so we need to create a list of levels. So let's create a list of levels, and people say those are variables, local variables. Let's say they're related. That's not true. So ABC is one concept, levels is one concept, this is another concept. They're different. That's what I mean, condense it. Okay? and then let's say um you create a new game, and you do something like this. So the biggest problem here is that levels, you would think that everything should be defined at the top to make it consistent, but that makes no sense, because by the time I read about those and this and did this, I already forgot about those and this. So I should only define it when I need it, just before I need it. And these are quite related, these are quite related. So the condensity should actually be put like this. And when you put it like this, you probably, if it had more business context, I would probably split this and this into methods, because this little gap says they're not that related, though relation can be many things. In our case, it's simply uh, comparison versus creating a game. It could be like this and it would make sense, but since there is little code anyways, this kind of separation and condensation of lines makes more sense. So that's what I meant by saying keep related code close, and variables close to their usage. Similar function should be close. Similar function should be close means that the function I called should go down. The function that I'll call next, let's say I will call next this function. Let's say I call next this function. What does that mean? That means, well, in this case it doesn't mean anything, but the layout should be the same as here. I called this function, I called this function, so they should go one after another. The tricky part comes when, let's say here you call this function. Oh, I called that function, so that function should have gone there. But then this function used the other function, and this is a bit tricky. And then this function used that function. So which function should go where? So Dance With Me 123 said that he prefers putting comments in those variables. I would still name them properly with a good name instead of a good comment. Well, in this case, it doesn't have any business logic, so it doesn't really mean anything. It's just numbers. So it's impossible to name this. And for this, probably test set something like that to just give a little bit insight of what's going on. But this is really hard to name well because it doesn't have any business logic. When you have your domain and when you know what your domain is doing, then you can name well based on the domain. Right now there is no domain, just a sandbox, so naming is hard. Or it's not hard, but it loses meaning. So in this case, I'm actually not sure how it should be put, because we have two things, but I would still go for the layout. Well, you shouldn't define a function before using it. I mean, this case, this function uses the one under it. So, but the one under it is being used here. So if I put this above this one, it messes it up. It messes it up because when I read about this function, uh, yeah, when I read about this function, I will, mm, I will, yeah, this is supposed to be put above. It makes more sense. This one uses that one, but this one was used before. It's a really rare case for this to happen, but it sometimes happens. But like you said, like you see, I'm still mixed with how this is supposed to be handled. I think either way is fine as long as you keep to the base layout for the simple layout. So you use a function and you stack them down vertically under in the same order you use them, prioritizing what you used in the function above and then prioritizing what you used in the functions under. Right? So vertically dense code, and that shows the example of variables or concepts which are condensed together, functions in downward direction. Don't use horizontal alignment, right? Uh, what that meant is that if I have equality here, some people do this to align everything in the same column. And this is horrible because that's against language conventions, first of all, and it breaks readability. Even though it might seem it's more readable, it's not. So don't do this. Keep lines short. Uh, so a rule of thumb for lines, the length of lines, is that you shouldn't have more than, well, you shouldn't have a line which doesn't fit on your monitor. That's a bad line and it should be split into two at least. Well, into as many until the line length is not more than the monitor's width. Before it was even more strict, as monitors before were smaller. So second rule is don't break indentation. Um, so you should put a tab as soon as you enter a scope, and with new scope comes a new tab. So you align your scopes, same level scopes should have same level alignment. White spaces, and this one is interesting. I always put this, a white space between operation, a white space between assignment. But this is a violation of clean code, because if it's not important, this is enough. If you want to emphasize it, you put a white space saying that the operator itself is important, so pay attention. uh, I don't know, it's my own convention that I always put the space between operator and both operands. And indentation in same scope, that's what I meant. You don't want this. You want to keep it here. But everyone follows this, more or less. Sometimes this happens, but quite rarely, so I won't stick to this more. What else? Yes, so use white space to associate related things and disassociate weakly related. So you can put emphasis with that separation. So avoid logical dependency, and this is a part of OP more, where where sometimes you have, let's say, a class order. So you have a class order, and order has, let's say, entity, let's say item, and let's say a date. Item, it's a public property, and it has a date. Which will be set when you create an order. So you create an order, you pass an item to it. You set the item to that one. It's immutable upon creation. So your item is this. And your date is current, the time which was the date created. And you have different dates. And the process, and you have different orders, and each order has a method process. So what that part said, avoid logical dependency, it meant that you should prefer you shouldn't abuse if statements for business rules, as sometimes polymorphism can be something which resolves it. And sometimes design rules, well, when it's too late, can prevent the extra need of evaluating those rules that you set, the if statements, the logical statements that you set in your methods. So for example, if I say if item is null, I will throw an exception. No order target found exception. And this is very related to other things, like if so this should be put here to avoid the logical rules, just the wrong place for doing validation. And rename this to null, but this is fine. If you have different kinds of orders in this case, you could have an enum, which would say the type this order is. I'll put this as private, sorry. It will be a field. Order type. Sales and purchase. Order type. And when you pass it, you pass it with a type, which you set here. Is equal to type. And you have two options here. Well, for now we did an enum. So if we'll do a switch because we do it based on a value, so we switch based on type, and if our type is purchase, we buy and we break. If our type is sales, we sell and we break. So this is one way to do it. It's an okay way to do it, but there's a better way to do it. So so we have order. We could do inheritance-based approach where we have a base order and then we have sales order and then we have purchase order instead of having an enum and letting polymorphism handle. So this whole statement would go away and this method would be abstract and this class would be also abstract. So that's one way to do it. But there is also a rule saying that you should prefer composition over inheritance. So we will still have an order. And we still have process method. But when we create our order, well, the thing is about this design itself, order should not process itself. Order should be processed by something else. So this should be called externally. It's a design issue. So let's call a class order processor, or just market. I'll call it market. Stock, no. Warehouse, no. Market calculations, maybe, or like business calculations. Business processor, maybe. A bad name, but under pressure cannot come up with anything better. Business processor. right? And this goes there. Okay. And this is single responsibility what we're doing now. We're just splitting order and its processing into two pieces. And we'll process order based on the type. Uh, but that's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I wanted to do. Uh, item date. I chose a bad example. Business processor. Okay. Mm, okay, so I process an order based on its type. I'll change this a bit differently. Make it a property. Set get. It will be public. And this one goes there. So based on the order type, we'll process it. But when we process it, uh, order order type. Right? Uh, buy and sell. Buy and sell. Buy and sell. Right. So we can do. Uh, so let's say there are multiple things you can do with an order. You can buy it. You can sell it. You can uh, mortgage it. You can put it for later, safe keep it, destroy it, hide it, some stupid actions, but a bunch of those. So instead of this statement, we can bind the type of an order with with an action. I'll just do a bunch of actions. Buy, sell. Action without T. Actions, it's a dictionary. So order type and action, actions, and we will have purchase buy, buy. Why can't I do buy? Buy. Because it needs to be why didn't it let me autocomplete with buy? I wonder. Non-static. Right. No, I still don't get why. Right, because this is being created when I... So I need to put the creation inside a constructor because now it's being called in a static context. Okay, read only. And actions created in a constructor. Constructor. And sell. Sales. Okay. So now we don't need this. And we can do actions. Order type. And that's it. So we no longer need to care what the process does. Another thing that we can do is to have each order having their action. So buy and sell will be in the order, but that beats the purpose why we split it, so that's a bad approach. I wanted to show dependency injection, but cannot really show in this case. I'll show then this. Inject the list of actions in the processor class. I could, but it's not injection, it's just creating actions. I want to encapsulate them and leave it there. Business processor. Let's say those actions buy and sell were complex. Okay, I get it. Okay. So we have interface, I business processor, I business action executor, I business action, and we have a method execute. Very vague, not so good, but this is for educational purposes. And we have a class sales processor, sales action, and we have purchase action. Implement, execute, and it's buying, it's selling. So now instead of binding to delegates and actions, we can bind to providers of those actions. I will give a dictionary again, but a different kind of dictionary of I action. So my actions are now equal to the injected actions, and I inject them through a constructor. Thanks for a remark. So now actions. If actions contains key order type, execute it. So I get it and I execute it. So here we define that we inject a dictionary of actions for a business processor. So if an order is sales, it will do sales action. Well, not yet, but we would need to create it. I could hard code this just like with the dictionary by predefining which business action is for sales and which is for purchase, bound to the key. Or I could have a business action factory, but that would create objects. Well, it depends. My point is that you want to avoid if statements and let polymorphism decide what you need to do. Polymorphism, dependency injection, you want your code to be as undependent based on conditions as possible. And that's it for today. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so that's it for today. Bye bye. See you.
Alright, thanks.
Thank you too.